Started off, we're going to do, since we're celebrating Rockwall County 150 years, we're going to start off with the sheriff of Rockwall County and go through. We can't go through all of them up here for amount of time, but we will mention some things about them, and we're going to. Mark's going to start it off first, and then we're going to put a few little twists on some of it that I think you'll find very interesting. And then, of course, we have Sheriff Terry Garrett here, so he's the last one in line right now of the 150 years, so we're going to have him come up at the end and speak.
All right. So our very first sheriff, as we celebrate 150 years in 1873, would have been Thomas Shaw. He was actually appointed, and he actually would be the very first sheriff of Rockwall County. Not a lot to talk about, but as you're creating any new organization and becoming that, as this county was being born, you know that John O'Heath was the first military officer, and really the auspices of that and all the military, Thomas Shaw, A.C. Starks, and what you're going to hear is a lot of military people, you're going to see a lot of their military experience start this process. And so Thomas Shaw, I believe, was also serving in the military originally, was an officer. Many of your officers did come to this area as they founded the state, as they were colonizing the area. So your first sheriff was Thomas Shaw.
Now, the first elected sheriff.
1873 was his first year because that's when he was appointed.
Okay, the first elected sheriff was Alexander C. Starks, was born in Kentucky on 29th July 1839. The oldest child of Issy Reuben Starks and Temperance Jan, better known as Tempe Starks. His father was the son of Kentucky pioneer Reuben Marshall Starks, and Janie Payne Tempe was the daughter of Reuben's cousin. So I did some research on that, and I couldn't really find anything on why Reuben Marshall Starks was. They're saying he was one of the pioneers, but now we had to change this, so I didn't have a lot of time, so apologize for that. His parents married in Callaway County, Kentucky, February 21st, 1836. On the onset of the war between the states, Alexander and his father, brother Jesse R., joined the Confederate Army. In one of the battles in the late 1862, Jesse R. Starks was taken prisoner by the Union Army and sent to Camp Douglas near Chicago, Illinois, where ironically his brother John Stark was being held. They both ended up in the same prison. Sadly, both Jesse R. and John Starks died in the prison. When Alexander returned home to Texas from the war in 1864, he learned of their deaths. He had no clue that they had passed away. He found his mother in frail health, both mentally and physically, at the loss of her husband and son. Alexander then took up farming to sustain his family, which included his mother, brother, and sister. In 1873, Rockwall officially began as a county, and the first election of the county officials was held in July 1874, where Alexander ran for sheriff of a newly formed county, Rockwall, and was successfully elected sheriff. And now he had a new occupation. In the fall of the following year, in 1875, while performing his duties as sheriff, he became involved with an altercation with a man named William Cannon, who was with a party of young men who were drunk in the town of Rockwall. Sheriff Starks approached them and asked them to keep it quiet, upon which a difficult occurrence occurred, resulting in Starks shooting and killing Cannon. Because of this, Starks was removed from his duties as sheriff, arrested and charged with Cannon's death. However, he was cleared of all the charges by a grand jury by the fall of 1876 and awaiting reinstatement as sheriff while making a living as a land broker and farmer. You know, that's pretty interesting that he was arrested for it while he was performing his duties. So, On September 30th, 1876, Sheriff Stark was assassinated on a Friday afternoon. This is according to the Galveston Daily News. A stranger came into Rockwall and requested to be shown a tract of land for sale near here where Starks went to show him. The stranger was with a shotgun, and shortly thereafter Starks was found dead in the East Fork Bottoms with a load of buckshots in his head, and the stranger was gone. In the beginning, the crime went unsolved. It took roughly a year for a break to finally come into the case. According to the language at the time, Cannon's relatives now had a bad feeling against Stark. This was back then, you had relatives, and it's basically, you had the Hatfield and McCoy feuds, so nobody took anything, even if you were wrong. If you killed somebody, they took it real personal back in them days. About this time, a stranger wearing green eye-colored glasses appeared in Rockwall, who for a time did nothing but loiter around town, pretending to be in search of a location to purchase land. At the time, there was no reason to doubt his intentions. This is how Starks came to hear of him wanting to purchase the land, and Starks had a tract of land he was selling about 2 miles from town. That's how the two of them basically acquainted, and the stories are, the man just kept wandering around town, and he was a stranger because, back in then, I guarantee you, everybody knew everybody around here. So, the acting sheriff of Rockwall, M.S. Austin, received a letter from the Lee County sheriff stating that a man answering the description of the supposed murderer had been arrested in the little town of Giddings. Parties who had seen the man in Rockwall were at once sent to Giddings for the purpose of identification. And on being confronted with the prisoner, without hesitation, pronounced him to be the man who wore the green eyeglasses in Rockwall, who left the town in the company with Stark, and who is generally supposed to be his murderer. He is identified as George Gardner and was apprehended, taken into Rockwall, and incarcerated in the Rockwall County Jail. According to the Galveston Daily News, in 6th of June 1876, Rockwall County Garner, the murderer, confined in Rockwall jail, refuses food and declares his intention to starve to death. The stress of the situation had to be tremendous on both families, but that in effect it had on Martha Gardner. Martha Gardner was his wife. Provided to be more than a curious one. Martha visited her husband in jail during the incarceration and trial, but the night before his scheduled execution, she carried out a plot that both she and her husband committed suicide. Now, again, it's never proved who done what, because supposedly he was poisoned and she was strangled by the neck. So there's lots and lots of suspicious there.
Wow! What is it?
Yeah.
So as we talk about the third sheriff, there's, as some of you may remember, Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. So, and Barry Cannon is going to be very important what I'm going to be talking about here, but I'm going to be bringing up M.S. Austin. He was a captain in the Army, and as you see here on this picture, he lost an arm, and he also later went on to be the second husband of the founders of McClendon, of the McClendon-Chisholm tract. So P.A. McClendon, his wife, got remarried. The second husband ended up being M.S. Austin. He is buried in the McClendon-Chisholm cemetery. And there's another captain who happens to be buried right next to him. Anyone care to guess who was buried right next to Captain Austin? Captain M. Barry Cannon was buried right in the same cemetery. So what happened to M. Barry Cannon? Well, he decided that he was going to go to Oklahoma on Quanah Parker's land in the native because you're not getting prosecuted in the Indian Territory. So, Embury went and hid. Embury had a daughter, and she got married to a Native American whose name was Gray. They had a son who they named Embury Canyon Gray. He went on to be known in the silent film industry, and as a roper, he was a world famous roper, and he became known as Beho Gray. So I did my history, and you can look in the Chicago Tribune. At those times, because we didn't have the internet, they thought the terms, 20 years, they could come back to the area and no one would remember. So basically, Embury fled to Oklahoma and came back when it was safe. He died in Rockwall County. So he is buried next to M.S. Austin. So you tell me how that is. Rumor has it that they were kind of tipped off and they were lifelong friends. So that is the whole story, and there is a book written about Beho Gray, and the descendants actually live in Austin. Clark Gray wrote a couple books on Beho, and he confirmed the stories of how it got there. So I have talked with the descendants to figure out the stories. W.L. Brown, many of you may know, is considered the namesake to which city? He was the fourth sheriff, but he was also Fate. The city of Fate is actually named after William Lafayette, or Fate Brown. So we get to number 4. That is the intake of Fate. Fate started to become very important during this period, and they were talking about during this time to moving the center of the county seat to Fate. So you're going to see D.J. Anderson. Now there's 2 names as we get here, Ed Hall and E.W. Hall, which are both brothers to Ralph's dad. So those are Ralph's uncles. And then of course Mac Brown and then Artie Macklin were in between. And I have that book, if you don't know, I still have the book with their names in the book in my office. So that's kind of neat. So that kind of leads you up to 1934. So then we have Gilbert Hogg, who had a pretty decent run from 34 to 36 in the sense of then Jack Pullen, which is where you're going to go next, right?
Yes. With Jack Pullen, there's still descendants here with Jackie Pullen, his son, and Dorothy Pullens, which she was a school teacher here in the Rockwall ISD, as far as I know, all of her life, that probably taught, I know, some of y'all's children, and one of the schools is named after her. Who you want next, Mark?
I think we're just going to go to the most well-known sheriff in the history of Rockwall County, right? Besides Terry Garrett.
I think we're probably talking about the longest sitting sheriff.
The longest sitting sheriff, yes.
That would be W.J. Price. W.J. Price was sheriff of Rockwall County for 32 years.
And knew where all the ballots were, right?
Well, there's some different rumors about all of that.
Rest of us knew him.
Then we moved to Harry Knight. I think Harry Knight was only 2 terms, as I remember. And Harry Knight still lives here. He does have a son, John, that lives here. And his wife was, I know as far as was one of my teachers in school, and she was retired with the Rockwall ISD as far as a lifelong teaching. Now we do have a question, Terry. Is it a requirement, or what's the deal here, that several of the sheriffs up here, their wives are school teachers?
It probably is a requirement just to teach them how to report or something. That's probably my case.
Okay. From that point, we have Harold Evanson, which was, I think, was 18 years, 20 years. 20 years. Harold Evison was the next, as far as longest sitting, second sitting longest sheriff in Rockwall County. And then that leads us up to this.
The best looking sheriff of all 254 counties, who was a former police chief and started with Rockwall, right? You started at Rockwall.
Yes.
So, and
You started at EMS, didn't you, Terry?
Yes, sir.
Started at EMS, it was Rockwall PD, and then you became in Rockwall, you'll, right now, we're going for 150 years with our,
I'm saying they're the best looking. I don't know what he's saying.
well, I don't know, I've known him all my life, so. Terry grew up in Heath, and around Rockwall County, so, but right now, we're gonna let Terry finish it off with 150 years.
Thank you. The question was, W.J. Price was 44 to 76. You asked that question.
Wait, once more.
44 to 76.
44 to 76.
32 years.
And anyway, I'm Terry, and I grew up here in Rockwall County. Had family in Heath and in Rockwall. Kind of a long history with that. Also, started doing some research on genealogy stuff, and have some ancestors that actually came to Texas around 1820, 21 area. So I'm getting old. But anyway, my grandfather, Cotton Terry, was a commissioner here for 22 years. So I knew W.J. Price and all those, all of the others along there through the years also. So it's been, you look at some of those pictures, and some of them look like babies now, but some don't. But it's been, it was good working with some of those guys. Like Johnny said, Harry Knight is still living here in the county with Anna Lee, and of course, health issues and things come up. Work with both of his sons, David and John, while I was at Rockwall PD. Started out in Rockwall PD in '79, and then in 2005 left Rockwall PD, went to Heath as the chief in Heath. Spent 15 years there, and then ran for sheriff as Harold Evanson was retiring here, and so I'm starting my third year here and 44th year in law enforcement. So I was wondering at times if I would make it the first year, but that's probably a different story and a lot of other stories behind that. Rockwall County, as you know, the smallest county in the state of the 254 counties. The Sheriff's Association of Texas started meeting around 1872, 73 time period. W.J. Price was actually one of the presidents of Texas Sheriff's Association of Texas. And if you go down to San Antonio, there's I think it's called Buckhorn Bar.
Buckhorn's, well,
Saloon.
It used to be part of the old Lone Star Brewery.
Yeah, and so they have one of his badges in there actually. And so but we're excited about celebrating the 150th year and have some things planned for later on this year to celebrate that. Bud, most of you know Bud Pierce here. Bud was one of our original posse members 30 years ago, one of the founding members of the Sheriff's Posse, and they continue to do a lot of things for the Sheriff's Office, and all volunteer force that comes out and helps round up stray livestock. And then of course we're in charge of that as far as taking them to market or sell or to return to the owners. Do the parades and the posse roundup every year up here on the square are some of the things that the Sheriff's Posse does. So they represent the Sheriff's Office and the county very well. I want to go over just a couple of things that probably some of these guys didn't have the same numbers. I think back and say with Stark or some of the others, I mean, even in a county as small as Rockwall County, how do you get to all parts of the county in a short period of time? That would be tough, wouldn't it? Back in that period of time, you're going on horseback or wagon or something like that. And, answering calls probably has changed quite a bit. Some of this, there are some areas of the county, as small as it is, that were literally the wild, wild west back then. Look at some of the pictures of the downtown area, the south side of the square here. I think there were a saloon or two there. So they were kind of by themselves also during those times. And you had cattle rustlers, ranchers, drovers coming through. Today, we have approximately 170 personnel of the sheriff's office. That includes our clerks, our jailers, and our deputies who respond to calls. We have our fugitive unit goes out, and we're responsible for doing the arrest once someone has been indicted, a grand jury, so we get the warrants on those. And so a lot of that involves travel to other places around the country to pick up those who've been arrested. Let's see, jail, our daily population is about 267, and we just completed the bond. When did the bond go? Is it 2018, 2019?
Terry.
When the bond
We did a
was voted
tour,
in.
you'd give us a tour before we moved in there.
Did a tour right
I know
before
some
it
of
was
y'all
open.
probably participated in that.
And so that was a $50 million bond, and so that almost doubled the size of the jail. And I always had people ask me, so were you gonna fill it up? Well, that's not really my. Yes, we fill it up, it's our responsibility, but it's not our responsibility to go out and just look for people just to fill it up. Most of the ones all of the ones in there kind of earned their way through those doors. And that has changed quite a bit. If you remember, if you were there during the tours, looking through that building, there were probably 5 different iterations of that building from when it first went from upstairs here. And I spent a lot of times when I was at Rockwall PD up and down those stairs. Today we try to get our steps in, and we try to get our exercise and go to the gym and all that. You didn't have to do that back then because there was no elevator in this building. And you're going up and down the stairs sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a night, especially on the weekend. Our courthouse security, the sheriff is in charge of courthouse security. And if you've ever been at the new courthouse, you've seen that. You've been through the metal detectors there, and you're going to court, going to county clerk's office, district clerk's office, anyone else you might have to visit there. In 2022, we had a total of 75,393 visitors in there. That includes people going to court, attorneys, and the like. And that's quite a bit going through that building. Calls for service coming through our dispatch. There are 2 dispatch centers in Rockwall County. One is at our sheriff's office, the other is Rockwall PD. Number of calls that come through our dispatch center in 2022 were a little over 44,000. And then the calls for service that just the deputies answered were around just under 24,000. So 23 and some change on that. I've heard people say before, well, with the unincorporated area shrinking, you're gonna need less deputies, right? You don't have as much unincorporated area. There's nothing in the state constitution that says that the sheriff still isn't responsible for the whole county law enforcement wise. The state constitution says the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. So anything that happens in the county could come back on the sheriff's office. And we routinely, we have our district set up so that we can respond to other areas of the counties, particularly the unincorporated area. Most of that now is probably in the southeastern portion. We still have some pockets here in the northern part of the county, but our responsibility also is helping back up some of the other agencies in the county, Roy City, Fate, Rockwall, and they do that quite regularly. And and then a lot of the things coming down the interstate. I was looking at some statistics the other day, as far as drug arrests. Rockwall County is about number 4 in the Metroplex area as far as fentanyl confiscation and arrest. And everybody's heard about that recently. It's been on the news quite a bit, so we're dealing with those quite a bit today. We do have a lot of things going on around here. We're so close to Dallas, is in proximity, that sometimes you can't tell the difference. Even the criminals can't tell the difference, right? They don't know where the lines are. So they're coming across and they're committing their crimes here and trying to make it back into the Dallas or other places. And so one of the things that we constantly hear from some of the ones that we get in chase with or that we arrest, I didn't think you could chase. I didn't, why are you arresting me for this? You tell them where they are, they're in Rockwall County, and they go, oh crap, I didn't know I was in Rockwall County. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Do things a little different over here and over
Yeah,
there.
approximately 80% of the inmates in our jail are from other places. And so I've had questions about that before. It's like, well, why do we have so many that are not county residents? Well, I see Jim back there laughing. He knows what I'm about to say. My response is, you want us to only arrest people who live in Rockwall County? I don't think you want that. But the good thing about that is it shows that the deputies and the other officers in the county are doing their job, and ones who come out here to commit their crimes, we're catching them. We're putting them in jail. Yeah, it does create a resource drain on our court systems and all that. But you read in the paper what happens to some of the ones who come out here and commit the crimes and the sentences they get, and I think we're still doing the right thing out here. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. I mentioned the posse earlier. We have that corral over in front of the courthouse there. We're looking at doing some programs for inmates and for other probationers through the courts, things like that. And we'll be talking this next week about an equine therapy program. And I don't know if any of you have ever been through an equine therapy or any kind of thing like that. Horses are kind of like big dogs. They can read you like a book. And one of the things that the lady who's looking at doing this pilot program for us asked in the requirements to put inmates in there, and they're going to have to be selected. She said they can't be in there if they've ever had any kind of animal abuse charges or been involved in any kind of animal abuse. And one of the guys asked, well, why is that? What if it was years ago? Horses and dogs can pick up on that, and so we don't want them getting trampled. So this is going to be a very controlled course. It is a counseling course. The lady who's doing the project is a counselor, a licensed counselor, and we also have a licensed counselor in the jail that will help us do the selection for this with the first section of inmates. So hopefully that will pan out, and we'll be able to do a lot of good things with that. So I'll open it up for questions now. Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about the fentanyl problem in Rockwall County.
Well, it's here. For years, when I was working at Rockwall PD and then even at Heath, we would get questions. We started the first SRO program, or School Resource Officer program, back in '85. So we started putting police officers in the schools back in '85, and people would routinely say, well, how are the drugs out there? And the response, of course, I'm kind of a smart aleck sometimes, my wife tells me. My response was, well, from the ones we arrest, they say they're pretty good. So it's here, and we constantly, tell people to, don't bury your head in the sand. Whatever is happening in Dallas, Houston, Austin, anywhere else around the country, it comes through here. We're dealing with it. We may not be at the same numbers, but the fentanyl is out here. We've had, in the past year, I would say 4 fentanyl saves as far as the overdoses. Our deputies get there. All of our deputies carry Narcan, and so they're able to administer that, and without that, we'd have probably had 4 overdoses. So it is here, it's a problem. The cartels who are manufacturing stuff, they're getting more and more sophisticated. You heard about the deaths just across the border in Matamoros last week. There are lots of things going on, and it's not as primitive even in Mexico now making these things. We set in on a briefing from Eduardo Chavez, who's the DEA special agent in charge, just a few weeks ago, and he was showing some of the pictures of some of their lab equipment. It's not like you see on, what was that show, Breaking Bad? Yeah, it's not like that anymore with them. They're professionally producing those. Some of the lab equipment that they have probably gets pretty close to what you would see in a Pfizer lab. And they're making billions and billions of dollars on that stuff. So, it's here.
Just want to put a plug in for your Guardian program. I don't know if everybody knows about that, but it's, you could explain if you want, or I can
Sure.
tell you what I know about it. It's an opportunity for people to enroll with the sheriff's department, their family members or loved ones who may have the potential to wander from their homes, such as autistic kids or adults. I'm involved with the Alzheimer's Association. I facilitate a support group here, and I make sure that all of the folks in the group have a copy of their little brochure, which allows you to register with the sheriff's department, that loved one, a picture, all of the demographic details, so that if there's ever an event, they can immediately activate their system to go find that person and to be on the alert for it, rather than having to collect that data and then do it. It's all done in advance.
Yeah, anything we can do to have prior knowledge for at-risk populations, the better it is. When I first started working at Rockwall PD, probably the population of the entire county was around 12,000, and now it's upwards of 114,000. And with the number of people moving in, we have more at-risk populations, whether it's juveniles, whether it's elderly, whether it's just, you know, any number of things. But the prior knowledge we have of that could assist us when we have to start looking for those. Last weekend, as a matter of fact, we assisted Fate on a situation. I think it was an autistic child, and you know, you get upset like anybody else, and there are different levels of that, but you know, everybody is kind of an all hands on deck movement. You know, everybody gets together and starts looking for those, any prior connections as far as who they hang out with, where they're going. That really helps us out. We have some volunteer organizations here in the county that help us out also, CART and CERT. So I hate acronyms, but I had to say that just kind of get your attention on that. CART is the Child Abduction Response Team. They do more than just respond on child abductions. If there's a missing child, a runaway, or an at-risk child, they help us out, and they help us set up our command post. They will go door to door, trying to gain knowledge and try to find out what's happening. And so if we had something like an Amber Alert, even, they would be right there with us helping out with those things. The CERT team is the Citizens Response Team that was actually created after 9/11. They help us out on some searches also. And both of those organizations are manned by many of the same people. I know there are many members in the Marine Corps League here who are members of both of those organizations also. Anything else? Anything you always wanted to know?
Terry, you're talking
didn't know
about
that?
fourth in the nation as far as, you're talking about confiscating drugs because of
That's in the
Rockwall
Metroplex.
sits in the Metroplex is in what they call the I-30 corridor, everything going north. So everything comes in from the south, and this is basically the drug highway where stuff goes north.
And a lot of things you're seeing now, we're dealing more with human trafficking, with everything that's coming across the border. Talk to the sheriffs there on the border, and they're drowning. I mean, they have so many things that are hitting them all at once, and one of the things that they stressed to the sheriffs last August at our conference is, hey, don't be fooled, don't think we're the only ones dealing with it. Once they leave the South Texas area, once they cross the border, they're coming to you. And so we see that on a regular basis. We have agreements set in place with ICE, Homeland Security, and others, so that if we, get some of these traffickers through here, we can deal with them that way. And right now, they're swamped, and there are certain things that they're not allowed to do, but they're coming through here every day.
Do we have people, the trafficking, located here? I mean, is there a group of them that are trafficking like women and girls?
There are. It's all through the Metroplex. The hard part is how they blend in and to try to identify who it is, what they're doing. Many times the victims of human trafficking, whether it be male or female, a lot of times they're resistant on giving a lot of information because they've been kind of embedded. Your juvenile runaway population, that's a really big risk group to be involved with that. And some of these traffickers know that. Anytime you have a big event like a Super Bowl or any big event in the Metroplex area, you're probably seeing a lot of trafficking going on with that. And when someone is willing to kind of come out and say, yes, this is what's happening, they're holding me against my will or making me work against my will, we try to jump on that as quickly as we can. We work with the Rangers, Texas Rangers, with other agencies, the Attorney General's office, and try to get those cleared up as soon as possible. But it's really, the hard part is locating. It's hard to kind of know what you're looking for.
Can you talk about mental health? And because we got Veterans Court too, but we're one of the few, but we talk about our mental health and what we do because we're one of the best in the state.
My mental health?
Yeah, because we're not your mental health.
So mental health has been, in the last couple of legislative sessions, something that's been on the table and that we deal with all the time. The officers, you mentioned the Guardian program, but the officers and deputies also deal with these things on a regular basis. Yesterday, I think they dealt with the same person 3 or 4 times on the same mental health issue. And then sometimes, one agency will deal with them one day, another agency another day. So it's having that clearinghouse in the county and all of us talking together to realize what's happening. I tell people all the time, our jail over here is probably the largest mental health facility in the county. Now, we would like for it not to be. Some of these inmates, they need to be in a mental health facility, an actual mental health facility, not in a jail. That's still a jail. We've been talking with Senator Hall and Representative Holland a lot about that. The waiting period, if we get somebody in the jail who needs to be in what's called a forensic bed, needs to be in a mental health facility because they've been found incompetent to stand trial, it's taking upwards and over a year sometimes to get them in that mental health facility. We still have to deal with them, and that's where a lot of our assaults on our detention officers come from, and a lot of other things. Trying to medicate them. They don't want the medication. We can't force that, unless it's mandated by the court. And so we have to deal with those situations. We had one man last year added up the number of days that he had in jail. He'd already been to, I believe he went to Palestine twice. His total amount of time in jail, this was last year now, and he's back in the facility now, back in Palestine. But last year, his total amount of time in jail was over 750 days. That was probably more time than he would have served if he had been competent and stood trial from the day he got to jail. And so they need to be in a hospital, they need to be medicated, they need to be observed, but a jail is different from a prison, different from a mental hospital. even though with this new facility, we have the capabilities to deal with a lot of those things better now. But the legislature is dealing with some of those things. We have seen some improvement. I fired off a couple little nasty emails year and a half ago, and so we've seen some improvement on that. But it's not enough. We need a lot more improvement on the mental health field.